Let's now focus on our topic of discussion, which is youth and leadership. Have our elected youth been able to live up to par? Allow me to introduce my guest this morning. On my immediate left, Honorable Kimani Kuria Molo, Member of Parliament. We have Lon Felix, political commentator, as well as Shefa Okore, political commentator. Thank you so much for making time to join us this morning. Of course, you've listened to quite interesting remarks from young people from the different counties, and something has quite come out clearly. Some of the young people are saying they're not impressed with how the elected leaders within the parliament have been able to deliver on the promise that they made. I'll start with you, Honorable Kimani. You know, you are in the House. What is your sentiments in regard to that?
Thank you very much, and I would like to start by wishing all the best to KCP and KCSE candidates starting the exams today, and also to tell them that it's not all that serious. Do your best in the paper. It's the attitude that matters, not necessarily the grade that you actually get. This conversation about the performance of young legislators, you know, why even having this discussion in the first place? Have we had a discussion of how the older members of parliament are performing in parliament? We have a way as a country that we judge our young people too unfairly. And talking about a National Assembly that has 349 members, but out of these, only 10.6 of these 349 are actually youthful members of parliament. At the Senate, there are only 10 legislators who can say they're youthful. So even when we try as young members of parliament to pass some of these conversations or to pass some of the legislation that can work for young people, then the numbers that we have in the House don't work as much. I'll give a very good example. When we opened parliament, we had elections for IALA. You know, IALA is East African Legislative Assembly, and we had candidates like Dr. Aburu Dinga. We had very many candidates, but I remember we had one youthful candidate called Wangoi from, I think she was from Kirinyaga. We tried to get united as young people to make sure that one of us was elected into IALA, but the numbers were overwhelming. So they opted to vote in a former member of parliament who was one of their own. So even the conversation about the performance of these young people, we are having it at a place where we are already disadvantaged in terms of our numbers. And speaking that our dismal performance, who did that test? How was it measured? I'll tell you, for example, in this 1 year alone, we have had more than 10 motions talking about attributing issues of young people, like sports. Last week we were debating the issue of ensuring that we have artisans testing centers in every constituency. We're doing something, but the numbers we have are so little that what ends up being reported is what we talk about 2022 and what we talk about other things, and not necessarily what the young people are actually doing at the National Assembly.
All right, I'd like to get your comments, Lon. Are we unfairly judging the young elected leaders?
Thank you for having me. I don't think it's sorry, a question of unfair judgment. This is just, Mheshimiwa, this is just a process of holding you who have an opportunity to lead to account. And I think that is something that needs to be encouraged, and it's a debate that needs to go on. I think I sort of try to understand where he's coming from when he says there are issues over numbers, you know, in parliament and at county assemblies. However, the art of leadership also means that you have to build coalitions, and so you have to reach out to members of the older generation who would necessarily listen to what you have to offer, with whom you can. You know, I've seen bills sometimes in parliament being sponsored, you know, across the political divide, people from NASA reaching out to Jubilee. Then we would also expect that the younger legislators can also reach out to the older legislators, create coalitions and push issues that are relevant to the youth. So in my view, I think this is a timely discussion because perhaps when we talk like this, it also gives them a bit of support so that their colleagues in the assembly understand that he is not just representing Molo, but he's also representing many other young people from Busia, from Turkana, and all that. So I would encourage this debate. I think, Mheshimiwa, you need to look at it from the perspective that you have an opportunity to create allies, to really define the constituency that you're representing, and hopefully that narrative reaches to your older colleagues in Bunge.
All right. Shefa, let's get your input in this. We've had, various remarks in terms of the youth and taking that leadership mantle. Your sentiments?
I always have so many sentiments, but one thing that I'm agreeing with both of you is the idea of bringing forth a conversation that is very uncomfortable, right? And it is always very uncomfortable when people point the finger at you and ask you, what are you doing about this? Even though there are people there who are not being seen to be having the same finger pointed at them. But that doesn't negate your responsibility, right? Because holding a member of parliament position is a huge thing in this republic, right? And it is only right that people get to ask you what you're doing. It is only right that people check in with you as the person that they employed, right? Because the Constitution encourages that level of participatory democracy where we are able to ask our leaders, what are you doing? Where are you what are you up to, right? Where are you with this, and that? Because remember, yes, they talk about it's a year into the election, we've got all these people, whatever. But then during that period, there was all these promises that were being made. At least even one of them. Can we get an update where we are at, right? Can we get answers onto, this is what I have tried and failed? Because I'm also not unrealistic to say that I want them to perform 100%. I'm not that unrealistic because I understand how much you're disadvantaged, right? And I understand how the reality of politics in this republic makes it impossible for good people to actually win. I get that. But then the question is, even with all that against you, what is the one thing, or two things, or three things, that you've been able to address, that you're addressing, that you're in the process of completing? What is that thing? Because right now it seems like the conversation is around populist arguments, We want to walk into a referendum. We want to, talk about the agenda in like a big agenda without actually breaking it down into, in my constituency, what does that mean for my people? In my constituency, when I talk about excess taxation, what does that mean for my people? In my constituency, when I talk about insecurity, what does that mean for my people? Because I think it is time that the younger legislators embodied the idea of service. And stop doing a lot of the speaking now doesn't work because people are getting frustrated and people are asking very hard questions and there's just nowhere to run, and that's the responsibility of leadership. Then it makes me question, did you want this role for the title or for actual performance? So there's a lot of reflection. I think it is a good conversation and it is timely. So just start reflecting on, okay, my people are actually aware that I hold this position. Because we've also seen Kenyans complain about these legislators who come, we got them elected and then they never show up. They live in Nairobi. Apparently now your constituency became unlivable for some reason, So what's happening? It's a good time to just reflect on what young people need to do. And then it's also a lesson for younger people wanting to get into these positions to understand that it is not just getting in, that's the end. The work actually begins. So where are they now?
Honorable Kimani, where are you now at this point? What measures are you putting in place to ensure that the young people are taking on that mantle and they're going for it?
One thing that I would like first to clarify is we're welcome to suggestions and to ideas on how we can perform our roles and make sure that the youth are represented. And where are we? I give an example of when we opened Parliament. We wanted to make sure there are more of us. And when there was a chance for Yala, we really tried to push for one of our own. We're talking about several members of Parliament. I'll give an example for what I have done for the young people. There is a gap between when people complete their fall form, for example, there is a group that makes it to university. C+ and above, outright. You're waiting for placement at a public university, you're good to go. The others that get between C and C-, you want to go maybe to KMTC or a TTI or to do a diploma course, and it's outright. The future is outright. That's where you want to go. But what about those that get a D+, that get a D, and get a D-? This is a group that of the young people, and this forms the greatest part of our population that has been neglected for a very long time. So what did Kuria Kimani, a youthful member of Parliament, do? So this financial year, I have 300 young people drawn from across my constituency who you're paying the entire cost for through hairdressing, carpentry, masonry, electrical work. So these people can get the skills that they need to fight this animal that we're calling unemployment. So I would say there's a lot of individual efforts being made. And eventually, if I make that effort in Molo and another young legislator makes that effort in Nairobi, another one in Mombasa, then overall we'll have our young people having more leverage even tomorrow. When it came, when the handshake came, for example, President Uhuru and Right Honorable Raila Odinga appointed a 14-member committee to spearhead the handshake. And as young legislators, we sat down and asked, who are the young people in this 14-member team that's going to make sure that the issues of the youth are addressed in this handshake you're talking about? And remember, it is the young people that get hurt the most when there is violence. And what did we do? We said we may not be included in the 14, but we actually, through Kenya Young Parliamentary Association, have been doing rounds over the country, holding county hall meetings, telling people, young guys, like, come on. The handshake is not about the old people, it's about us, because it's us that don't go to school, it's us that lose the jobs, it is us that get hurt during this violence. We've done that in Nakuru, we've done that in Kakamega, we've done that in Kibra, and we're doing that in several other places. When I talk about fight against corruption, Kenya Young Parliamentary Association, we have been on the forefront to say, come on guys, this stealing must stop. And we have actually said that over and over again. I serve in the Public Accounts Committee, and I'll tell you, I have played my role as a member of PAC to make sure that that the books, like when we got in, we got a backlog of for 4 years. You know, the last audited books was in 2014, 2015, and we sat down as a committee and we tell the chair now, come on, we have to complete this audit process. So I would say, as individual members of parliament, I can point out several people that are doing something here and there.
But it's not felt as much as we would like it to be seen, right?
Yes, that's true. But you're 37 out of 349.
So
And
that
again,
serves as a disadvantage to you?
Yes, and I'll also tell you that the fact that you elect a young person, and I think as youth people, this is the conversation I would like us to move forward, does not necessarily mean that a youthful person is a good leader. You know, that we must also make it clear.
So integrity issues as well comes up in terms of leadership and the young people.
A youth leader is as good as an older leader, and anyone can, you know.
All right. Lon, I can see you're really eager to speak on some of the things that Honorable has said.
So I have, I have the advantage of knowing Honorable Kuria from way back in campus. And I know he's a good man. However, there are a couple of things that I need to point out. At the constituency level, the efforts that members of parliament are doing, that is really good. However, in addition to you, the Honorable Kuria, sponsoring 300 young people to do technical courses, which is amazing, to really transform the lives of people slightly beyond your constituency, then let's move that conversation to the policy level and address TVET at a policy level in Parliament. There is also something that is coming up. I think we shouldn't fall to the narrative that as a young, as a member of parliament, you're constrained in terms of resources, in terms of numbers, in terms of all that. What I would hope to see is that as youthful parliamentarians, you distinguish yourself from the normal narrative. Those who have come before us have told us, I am only getting 300 million shillings, so I can only do up to 300 million shillings. We, as young people, would like to see a leadership that tells us we have gotten 300 million shillings from the exchequer, but as a parliamentarian, I have also lobbied an extra 300 million shillings from the private sector. The issue of what is being given prominence, the press will always, they always say when a dog bites a man, it's not a story. When a man bites a dog, it's a story. That is how the press works. So your colleagues who are sensational, who will go out there and create drama and do fist fighting in parliament will get airtime. But then it is an issue of, especially through a body like KYPA, which I have interacted with part of its work, it is you to define your own narrative and set priorities and then go out championing for that. For example, when you say the president and the Right Honorable Raila Odinga nominated old men into the handshake committee, it's an extremely valid point. My representation as a young person cannot stop at the point of we spoke about it. No. I am 100% sure if KYPA issued a statement and said we need one young person represented in this, the president would have nominated it. I think it is an issue of we shouldn't fall to the, and it is very tempting, and I know as a public servant you're overwhelmed, your constituents overwhelm you with their needs and all that, but we shouldn't fall to the temptation of believing that we are limited, we can't do this, the numbers are against us. I think we need to see a little much more effort. Yeah.
Shefa, what punctuates, the country's political environment is what I might say chronic capitalism, right? So where young people are often part of, the agenda, but they're not on the table to discuss those agendas. How do we shift this narrative to now the young people being on the table to look at some of the issues that are ailing this country?
I think unpacking capitalism on the table narrative is a process, just like any other process. And I think those are some of the things that people need to have conversations about very honestly, right? So if you even talk about being on the table and having access to that table to even begin with, and then realizing that my impact on this table is dependent on the number of people I am rallying their support, or I am leveraging on their support and networks to be able to push my agenda. It's the same thing that happens even in parliament, right? Where if you're a lone ranger in parliament right now, as a young person who's focused on young people's agenda, young people's issues, and trying to really push through that, you'll find yourself alone, because nobody really wants to do the disrupting of the status quo and what everybody is saying. And that's what's happening now. And I think that's what you are trying to say about how, you find yourself in this space where it is only you who is seeing this thing. So how do you push it alone, right? But then there is the forgetting that you represent an entire constituency of people who actually voted for you. And we're assuming they voted for you because they believe you're a good leader and not because you came in through some defunct process. Because that's also something we need to unpack. How do young people get to these spaces where they are at? And that's always been my bone of contention. Because if you come onto the table through the back door, and politically now, if you come to the table to political power, through a political party that you have no control over, you did not build, you have no stake in their policies, their agendas, their vision, nothing, then you're literally a puppet, So they used you, so it was tokenistic, so they used you to fill a seat. You literally have no power. So that's where you will find most of our young leaders who are in parliament now are stuck, because how you got here is questionable. Because somebody somewhere picked you and said, Lon, I think you're a very sober young man. Come to my party because we are looking at this representation of youth. So he comes as Lon Felix, but then he can't even tell us we need water in the party building because he does not belong. You see what I'm saying? So at that point, even when it comes to issues of, quote, handshake, tax, employment, inclusivity, representation, he has no voice. Because he remembers very well who put him on the seat. And that's a question, and that's something that's very big. How do we even get young people to where they are, right? To even mind to what he was saying about youth versus old, it is the process. A process that is flawed, a process that is defunct, a process that is questionable, does not stand on integrity or accountability, will absolutely release that type of leader into the public, right? Yes. But any other process that stands on the rule of law, stands on Chapter 6 of the Constitution, talks about, you are here as a young person who's qualified, not just by age, because age is not a qualification. I look at age as a consideration, where when you are talking about you want to put people on the table, then you have to consider younger people, not because they are young, but because there is a way in which their youthfulness brings in newer ideas, newer energy, newer ways of thinking, newer ways of imagining their country. That's why you need to include them. So if the process is terrible, absolutely you're going to have terrible people. It doesn't matter age, you know, because at the end of the day, people are people and people represent the system.
All right.
So if you're seeing young people who are problematic, it's a problematic system that's shunning them out. You know, so how do you even clean that out to bring in young people who have the power to say, we want a younger person represented in the East African or whatever, so we can have these people, because I'm sorry, you don't have control of us when it comes to this, right? We want to be represented in this handshake, or we don't want to be represented in this handshake because we don't feel it represents us, you know, because we still feel that there are certain things around this handshake that is problematic to us.
Right.
But you can't have that level of power if how you got where you got, somebody has a leash on you. It's problematic.
Right.
So that's how capitalism works. It puts you in this cage where you're always thinking that if you leave, you will lose. But then you're staying and you're still losing, you know? So you're stuck.
You're stuck.
Yeah.
And of course, Honorable Kimani would like to answer to that. Quite interesting. But at this point, let's take a very short break. Youth and leadership is the topic. This morning, we're also keeping an eye on the exams, KCPE underway. Let's take this short break. We are discussing youth and leadership. Of course, during the discussion in our Eldoret studios, there was a question that was posed, and I'd like just to remind you, Kibet was saying the youth are not getting, or rather, you know, the support structure that is needed, and sort of there's a deliberate push to remove them from handling those top and critical leadership positions. Maybe before I get to you, Honorable Felix, I'll start with you. Do you agree with those sentiments?
Yes, it's very difficult for a young person at this particular point to get into an influential government position. And the support system of how the bureaucracy of government, how it works, it sort of respects things that many young people don't have. It respects years, it respects experience. It does not necessarily respect talent and all that. But what I sort of want to point out is, for example, if you look at the Kenyan public service, it has a very old workforce. I think a few years, about last year, there was a research that was released, and close to 30% or so of the Kenyan public service needs to exit within the next 7 to 10 years. So at some point, 5 to 10 years. So at some point, the public service has an opportunity to bring in younger people, new talent, fresh perspectives and all that. Is it going to happen? It can only happen if we have deliberate action towards it. And so maybe even as we progress this conversation, what I would want, for example, to hear from the Honorable Kuria is, what can we as your constituents help you so that you function and work effectively? And I think there are many young people across the whole country who would be happy to rally together to help in drafting a bill, to help in convening and hearing you out. There are a lot of, silently when we have conversations off air, I think there is a lot of pressure that they are facing.
And are the young people giving that environment needed to help the leaders that are up there?
And so that is what I would want to hear, say, from them. Like, what can we as the people who are outside, who are willing to see them succeed? And this is important to us, because if Kuria succeeds as a member of parliament, it is one more stigma less that a young person will be facing. Because if another person goes to run in a different constituency and they question him on the basis of age, he's able to point at Kuria and say, look at where Molo is, give me an opportunity. So it is in our interest as young people to support them, to see that they succeed. But we would want to hear, what is it that we can do? Because we are not on the corridors of parliament. We are not experiencing the same pressures they are experiencing.
All right. Yeah. Chef, I see you also agree with the same.
Completely. I mean, because we don't know, right? And even your constituents, when they're not aware, so how do they even support? How do they even know what they need to do and what they shouldn't do, right? And even during the long break, we were discussing with him, and he was explaining a lot of the struggles that they go through. things that should be completely debanked, right? Things that should be put out in the public, so everybody takes responsibility of what they need to do in this space where we are in. And even when we talk about, I am demanding this for my leader, but even me as a voter, as a constituent, as an active member in this democratic space, this is what I'm also doing to help that be realized, right? So we are not also operating in silos, you know, where the member of parliament, all they do is come and rally people to spaces and just create all this function and whatever and celebratory things, and then they walk away, but then we don't have the services that we require. So how are they even ensuring that they're breaking down all that for their constituents to understand that this is how you tap into this? If there are structures that are weak, how do we strengthen the structures, right? If there are institutions that we can leverage to encourage whatever is happening to keep moving forward, how do we do that? So the question is, there's a lot of hows that have not been answered, you know? And I think it's also the culture of the politics in the country where, you know, you're expected to be this enigma of something that's untouchable, inaccessible, you know, beyond reproach, beyond question, beyond doubt. So now, you know, we look at you like, okay, you have taken upon yourself to be this mini god, go ahead and succeed. But then we will still ask you questions. I would love for the young parliamentarians to take it upon themselves to dehumanize, like to completely humanize their positions and become actual servants and say, I'm sorry, I can't do this because this and this and this is what's stopping me from achieving these things you need. So in order to achieve this, this is what we require. But you see, we need to know also what their plans are. We need to know what they are doing to ensure these plans are happening and how we can tap in. So there's a lot of conversations that need to happen, and they should be very honest conversations. So it doesn't have to be conversations in fancy hotels. It has to be conversations within your constituency.
With the people on the ground.
With the people on the ground. So they know. So if they are pressurizing you for water, tell them this is what is happening with this water situation. This is where we are at. And completely just say, I'm very honest about the fact that I am unable to give you ABCD right now because of this and that. But you don't create the cartel system of now you're just blaming him for, you know, we don't have water. So now we don't no. There has to be conversations about how we are going to be led and the people leading us. There has to be a conversation.
Honorable Kuria, are there strategies to change that particular narrative and have conversations with the people who elected you, and you being a young leader within Parliament? Is there a strategy?
Thank you. One of the things that I'm glad we're actually having this conversation is that, first of all, what is the role of a member of Parliament? Let's start from there. What's the role of a member of Parliament? The role of a member of Parliament is legislation, representation, and oversight. How do you legislate? How do you represent? How do you oversight? The current system of National Assembly of Parliament is through the committees of the National Assembly. So, for example, to which committees do a particular member belong to? Because even when you find bills in Parliament, even when you find these reports come to Parliament, they originate from a committee that ideally every member of the National Assembly is a member to. How do I serve as a member of Parliament in my legislation role? It's through my contributions at the National Assembly. So before you say that these young people are not doing well, can you go to the Hansard, which is a public document, and find out how many contributions has Kuria Kimani made at the National Assembly? How many contributions has MP X and Y made at the National Assembly? Because that is the real work of a member of Parliament. And then we can do that. We can come and have a conversation and tell me now, you know what, Honorable Kimani, you have not been representing the people of Molo at the National Assembly. But you're giving me a blanket that you young members of Parliament are doing anything. And you see, even most of the people that are saying this, I was watching that clip here, are actually young people. These are young people who are saying we're very good at technology. So just need to take your smartphone and Google. Go to Mzalendo, go to the Hansard, you know, get a session in Parliament and ask for an invitation, come and see how do we conduct business. Even our committee business, for example, is open to public. And these are people, and you're welcome to come and audit this. Then that is when you're going to have a real conversation of who is working and who is not. But I also tell you as an individual, since I got elected, I've had a series, maybe more than 10 meetings with especially the young people, or drawn across the constituency. In fact, and you're saying, what are the issues? Where can I come in? And the many times I said flatly that I'm not able to do. But also encouraging even the young people for us even to support you. Like, I'll surprise you. I get along across people from my, and someone tells you, I have a degree in computer science, could you help me get a job? Then it's a good, fine. I could share your CV with my friends and see if you get a chance. And ask them, can you send me your CV? And then they bring a 2-page document in a foolscap, crumpled like this. Then I'm like, you actually have a degree in computer science and you cannot have your CV, typed.
Presentable.
And we're talking about the presentability. Before we get to the CV being presentable, let's have a typed CV for starters. And I'm telling you, and I'm saying this without fear of contradiction, majority of the young people out there expect that since when I meet Kuria Kimani, member of Molo, like, get me a job. And I'll tell you, tomorrow, go to place. In fact, I did that to somebody. I told them, I know somebody I used to work with and they have this opportunity, and could you go and meet them on Monday? So the guy walked on that office on Monday in jeans and this is a clerical job, like an account assistant position, without any papers. So then it's like, hey, nimetumwa na KK, okay, they call me KK in Molo. Nimetumwa na KK kuhusu ile job ya account assistant. Then really, will that finance manager take you seriously? So even as much as we would like to have many programs support the youth, I would ask my fellow young people, let us also take our time to brand ourselves, to present a particular demeanor that even when I send you somewhere, then you actually a true representation of the young people.
All right, Honorable KK, KK in some other language it means food. All right, but you've raised a very interesting, discussion. The other day, President Uhuru Kenyatta also came out criticizing young people, for crying foul when left out on state jobs, saying they themselves end up, sort of messing up that job when given the mantle. Felix, do you also agree with the same, that, sometimes we are the ones who mess up our jobs and mess up for the other people?
I definitely will not agree with the president. And you see, sometimes when the status quo wants to perpetuate itself, actually, I think there's an African proverb that usually says if a hyena wants to eat its children, it accuses it of smelling like a goat. I agree. There have been instances when young people who've been given opportunity have messed up. We can point them out. We had issues at the Youth Enterprise Development Fund when the gentleman Bruce was there, and there are a couple of other examples, okay? But there are also examples, a lot more, where young people are doing really good things in state corporations, in the private sector. Yes. We do not have an excuse as a nation to say, well, you have failed. I mean, if failure was the basis of excluding a generation from participation, then we have a whole lot more excuses to exclude the older generation. They are the ones who plundered the country. They are the ones who have stifled our institutions. We have 1,001 excuses, reasons to kick them out of politics. To kick them out of I think where the leadership of this nation should be leading the younger generation towards is an induction into a newer version of leadership. Because you see, as younger politicians, they're only responding to the existing politics. I would be happy to hear the president say, do not follow our ways, do it differently. But not to say, you have, when we give you opportunities, you're failing. Perhaps one of the key examples is we're failing because we are emulating you, So that is an excuse that should not perpetuate itself. But it also points to a danger that as a generation we will face. That if you're given the privilege of opportunity to serve and you mess, you become the example, If the younger MPs fail this time round, when we go to elections in 2022, they will say we gave so-and-so an opportunity, he failed. We gave so-and-so an opportunity, he went to Bunge and fist-fighted. We gave so-and-so an opportunity. And that will be the basis of now excluding a whole generation from participation. So then, my request to those who have these privileges, do your job and do it right. Because it is not just about you, it is about a million of other young people who want to seek opportunities.
So you do not want to miss that opportunity for
Yes.
them as well. Shefa, you know, this conversation would go on and on, but we're so limited of time. I'd like to get your closing remarks as we go back this way. Very briefly, what would your advice be to the young leaders elected and those who are also looking at getting elected in, you know, positions within the leadership positions?
I think go back to why you wanted these positions to begin with, why you wanted to vie, what you wanted to achieve, who you wanted to become when you are done. Let's go back there. Let all of us go back there. Why you thought this was a space for you to be in, right? If it was to make money, be honest about that, because at some point it will show. You know, we'll find you in a corruption deal, we'll find you in a maize scandal, we'll find you somewhere, right? But if you actually came into this to serve, what are some of the things you wanted to serve on? What was that platform? So we can help build that. Because like Felix said, a lot about the youth getting into political spaces of power, getting into even corporate bodies and parastatals, depends on how, you know, we are perceiving or how we are going to treat everybody now who is young in these positions. And it's going to come back to all of that, right? So I am very I'm very optimistic in like a terrible way because I feel like there's enough of young people to still make it right, you know? And I feel like there's enough space as well for the young people in leadership to be brave enough, to be bold enough to do the right thing. It costs us something, but we have to do the right thing. I mean, we've messed up so much, we shouldn't be finding a new law to go to.
Right.
We need to do something right. And they can be bold enough to do that. I mean, if we have, and you know the way they say change is very infectious. If you see somebody speaking about something very boldly and very adamantly and wanting to pursue that, someone else also wants to do the same thing. So I believe the young leaders, they really don't have a lot to lose, like the older guys who are really here for preservation and whatever. They have enough time to make it right. So can we just see them being bold enough to doing the right thing? There's still time.
It is, in fact, this is the right time to
This
start
is the right
changing
time.
that narrative.
Yeah.
Felix, very briefly, your comments.
My comments would be towards the younger leaders and the bodies that they work through, for example, the Kenya Young Parliamentarians Association. I think one thing that that they need to prioritize is to learn and to be humble enough to know that maybe with a little reaching out to those who've been there, to the private sector, to opportunities slightly outside the country, they'll probably have a better understanding of how to even support their constituents. And then the second and my last comment would be create alliances with your constituents. There are millions of us who are willing to see you succeed. So if it means drafting a bill, we are able to take away that cost from you. If it means you asking us to draft a proposal, I think people are able and willing to organize themselves and do that. And if it means that you're not being heard when one of us should go to Yala and you want to call us to the streets around Parliament, we will also come.
Indeed. Honorable KK.
This is a very timely conversation about where is the place of the young people in the society. And I know young members of parliament have been really on the receiving end on their performance. But as I said earlier, let us evaluate us from the three roles of member of parliament: legislation, representation, and oversight. And let's also remember the working of members of parliament and not just what you see on TV. There's a lot that goes behind the scenes about our activities and our respective committees that we sit. I would also encourage each one of you get access to the Hansard of the National Assembly and see the meaning of us making meaningful, well-researched, well-thought-through contributions towards the bills and various motions that come to the National Assembly. And as I wind up, let's have also a conversation of many of us, you know. I can't emphasize that many times enough, because the needs of the young people are the same. There are very many fronts that we actually get to meet and agree. And the youth, I'll say youth for youth, let us be... The women, for example, have been really trying to push an agenda for other women. As a young people, even the way we're going to get listenership from executive, from the authorities, if we confront and say we are fronting up this particular candidate for this particular position, then we can get it. And as a wind up, please allow me to wish the best of success to our candidates. And I will want to finish with this of the outside the youth in politics, that the exams in this country are overemphasized. That's why we are militarizing it. That's why we are deploying all our security forces to go and man these exams. Dear candidate, do your best. No matter the grade that you get, should not determine your success in life. Your attitude will. Thank you and God bless.
All right, thank you so much. Quite very inspirational comments there by Honorable Kimani Kuria, Molo Member of Parliament. We also had Lon Felix, a political commentator, as well as Shefa Okore, a political commentator. Thank you so much for making time to join us this morning. Well, we were talking about youth and leadership and how the young people can be able to get to those top leadership positions and, of course, change the narrative of the current political environment and, of course, for the future generation.